Good morning. Dan Joe sends his apologies for not being here today. He became ill while traveling and decided to remain where he was until he was feeling a little better. So we probably should have added him to the list this morning of those who are ill or in distress. And now I'm going to keep talking with my mask on. So if you have trouble hearing me, just raise your hand, please. And that applies to you people on Zoom too. Can you hear me okay now? Okay, great. So several years ago, I edited a book called Seeds of Virtue, Seeds of Change. And it had teachings from 27 women Zen teachers in it, a little bit like herding cats with that many Zen teachers. But the very first story in that, the very first teaching in that book has always been one of my favorites. And so I decided to use it as the basis for the talk this morning. This piece was by Wendy A. Gyoku Nakao, who is, or was, I'm not sure if she still is, the abbot of Los Angeles Zen Center. And the story is called The Authentic Tea Bowl Before Birth. So Moonheart, a Zen student, was serving tea to her special guest, Abbess Echo of a nearby temple. Mushin, a Dharma sister of the abbess, happened to stop by and was invited to join them. Mushin was a wild woman, in air quotes, and carried a bone instead of the usual ceremonial stick. Moonheart handed the tea to Abbess Echo in an ancient tea bowl that the abbess herself had given her as a gift. In the midst of appreciating the exquisite bowl, Mushin suddenly shattered the tea bowl with her bone. "Now," said the wild woman, "look at the authentic tea bowl that exists before birth." Moonheart blanched, gasped, and nearly fainted. Abbess Echo said calmly, "I gave you this tea bowl, but now I would like you to give it back to me. Before you do, gather the pieces, glue them, and fill the cracks with gold. Then have a box made for it. On the cover of the box, write the name of the bowl, which I now give as the authentic tea bowl before birth. I will reverently pass this bowl on to my Dharma descendants. Now I ask you, what is the authentic tea bowl before birth?" Well, we won't go into that koan this morning because what always struck me about this story was the shattering part. And it seems to me like there are times in our lives when shattering happens, when we have an exquisite tea bowl, an exquisite life that is going along just fine, and all of a sudden something happens and every possible thing changes, and our lives are not ever the same again as they were before that shattering. And this can happen in many ways. Maybe we lose our job unexpectedly, or there's a health crisis. We have a health crisis and part of our body quits working and it never works again. Or COVID comes along and shuts down all of our social connections. Or we have a natural disaster like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption or a flood, and we lose everything that we had, everything that makes us who we think we are. And these things are unexpected. We can't prepare for them. They just happen, and we can't go back to the way things were before, and we can't fix them either. And a lot of times our response is definitely shock. That's the first thing. We go into shock, and many different kinds of actions can be taken once we go into shock. And later we realize that some of the things we did don't make any sense at all because we were in shock. We might respond with anger. We might respond with bewilderment or paralysis. And we feel disconnected from the way things were. We're just stopped right there in our tracks, stopped in our tracks, and we can't see where to go from there. It's like Mushin, or I'm sorry, Moonheart, when the wild Dharma woman shattered the bowl, she just stopped. She was shocked. She didn't know where to go from there. She gasped. She almost fainted. It was so shocking to have the Dharma woman break her ancient tea bowl and leave it in pieces there. So a lot of times it's very difficult for us to assimilate what's happened. We can't take it in. We're just sitting there in shock. Or we might all of a sudden be kicked into frantic action. I've seen people after a death just clean out the whole house. This is such a shock, perhaps, that they're moved into action. They must take action in some way, some kind of way to mitigate the feelings that they're having, something to carry them through. Or we might just enter into grief and nostalgia for the way things used to be. We try to recreate our old life, put it back together again. So none of these things are particularly helpful. And what I'd like to suggest is that we have our practice of Zazen in which we can enter stillness. So we're already stopped. And if we take that opportunity of being stopped, we can just enter into the stillness of Zazen and be with whatever is happening now. Whatever is happening now. Instead of making a story in our minds about how we'd really like it to be, we can just allow things to be the way they are. We get to practice that all the time. And this is a really good grounding tool for us, something that allows us to put our roots back down, to help us to mitigate that ungrounded feeling of being all up in here and not being able to do anything about the way things are. So we can step outside of our emotion and try to use our discernment about what comes next. And this really involves an open awareness in the midst of our stillness. So then we're waiting to allow something to come to us. We're just remaining open so that whatever needs to happen next can appear in the world as we're sitting there in open awareness. Because trying to fix it ourselves generally doesn't work very well. And trying to run away from our feelings doesn't really help either. So open awareness and stillness implies a certain level of acceptance. When I was in training in psychology, they always told us, yeah, well, you know, acceptance is always an option. You don't have to like it, but acceptance is an option. Acceptance of the situation as it is. But again, I'll say you don't have to like it. It doesn't mean that you agree with whatever's happened, but you quit pushing back against it. Quit trying to make it better. Quit trying to make it fit into your story about the way the world is supposed to be. It's an opportunity. Oh God, how we hate that. Somebody says, oh, your dad died. Well, this is an opportunity for you. No, that's not really what we want to hear. But the thing is, these kinds of events, which change everything in our life, and the death of a family member changes everything. All the dynamics in the family all of a sudden are different. So it's an opportunity for something new to arise. And whether you take that opportunity or not, something new is going to arise, especially like I said in that particular example of a death in the family. There's no changing the fact that the family dynamics are going to change. That's going to happen. So it's good to be open and accepting of what's coming there in your family circle after someone who is central to the family has died. It's an opportunity to change your perspective. Now we talk about our views in Zen practice, about letting go of our views. So it's an opportunity to let go of our views and our ideas of how we think things ought to be. I have a friend who's, and I say, friend, I should probably point the finger this way too, but really has this idea about the way things are supposed to be and gets really upset if they aren't that way. So it's something that we all get stuck on. And well, it's not supposed to be like that, but yeah, it is. So we have to accept the way things are in order to move on. And we can change the way we look at things. We don't have to continue on in our old view of the way things are. That's one of the wonderful things about being able to sit and watch your thoughts. You can change your thoughts. You can change your perspective. You can change the way you look at life and move on. All of this takes trust, particularly in yourself, and trust in the practice. So we trust ourselves to be able to recognize when something comes toward us that is going to be helpful. We trust the practice to help us see those things, to help us use our wisdom and our discernment to see those things that might be helpful to us in this process of shattering. We need to trust that what we need is going to show up for us. And we have to have the patience to wait until it actually shows up. And this is another piece. There was a period in my life that I called the limbo period, where I had a really hard time seeing what my future was going to be like. And it went on and on and on and on. And to have the patience to stay in that place and not just try to make something happen. Because this is so often we want to make something happen when nothing is happening. And sometimes we need to just wait and be patient, and eventually things change, because we know from our teaching that impermanence is a thing, and nothing is going to stay the same way forever. So eventually things will move again, and we will find whatever it is that we need to do to carry us forward. And finally, part of trusting is to let go of our preconceptions, and which is what I've been talking about, our ideas of the way things should be. So there's that letting go piece again. Another instruction, I think, that we often get tired of hearing, but it's crucial, actually, to being able to be open, to sit in open awareness. We have to let go of whatever it is that we're holding on to that we feel is really important in our lives. And perhaps that thing needs to be let go of. So we have a good example right here in our room, here in our Sangha, of a shattering. And then perhaps it wasn't the kind of a shattering where everything broke into pieces. But our teacher of many years decided to step back from daily practice, and this has kind of left some pieces on the floor. And we are not always exactly sure how we're going to go forward, how we're going to put those pieces back together again. What does that look like? We want to retain the ancient tea bowl because this is the holder of all of our practices and our lineage, and the things that make Olympia Zen Center unique as a Zen center, because each temple has their own unique culture and practices. So we have things that Olympia Zen Center is, and we want to retain those things, and yet the bowl is broken in some ways, in that we aren't quite sure how it's supposed to look now. And we need to move forward into the future and bring some new things in order to, some pieces of gold. That's a very Japanese thing, is to put things back together and then put gold in the cracks, and then makes the tea bowl much more beautiful once it's been broken and you put gold in the cracks. Then it's even more beautiful. So we have this tea bowl that we would like to transmit to our Dharma ancestors, but we aren't quite sure exactly how we're going to put that back together. We can't return to the past, and we're really not certain what the future looks like. We have Genjo to hold us together. He's our glue right now to hold us together while we're trying to figure those things out. So I guess you could say that that's to put it back together is to find the Olympia Zen Center before birth. What does Olympia Zen Center before birth look like? What is that? So that's about all I had to say today. Perhaps you have some thoughts or questions.
Jikyo?
Yes.
I really appreciate that metaphor of a broken bowl and putting it together and something beautiful in the future. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
That is exactly what I needed to hear today. So thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to say that that was exactly what I needed to hear. Over the past 5 years, I had a major shattering in my life too, and it was everything you said was so meaningful to me and so inspiring. So thank you.
Jikyo?
Yes.
So how, I think I know the answer, but how do we meet most appropriately with the one who has experienced or gone through that shattering? Is there a certain, how do we hold that with that person in their presence?
Okay, so Steve's question is, how do we meet a person who's experienced a shattering? And how do we hold that in that person's presence? Well, I think we come to that once again with open awareness. We know that we don't just do Zazen on the cushion. We also do Zazen in daily life. And when we know that someone has experienced a great wounding of some kind, then we bring our boy, I hate to say we bring our compassion, because compassion is such an overused word anymore. We bring our openness, so and awareness, because we leave our own story behind. I guess that's what I really want to say. We get ourselves out of the way, because as long as our issues are in the room, we can't really take in the other person's pain in that way. And it's more about sharing the pain and allowing ourselves to feel it, rather than perhaps saying, oh, what can I do for you? Or trying to make the person feel better. It's engaging in the pain with that person and being present in that moment with that person. I think that's what I have to say about that.
This is probably as much as just a reflection rather than a question, but I too find the image of the shattered bowl very useful. But it's often, when you talk about losing a job or a death in the family, those are things that happen. They're kind of outside your control. I find it perplexing often when it's my own decisions, my own choices that I plunge into, that maybe more like actually hitting and deliberately breaking the cup, that I find that it's like my own decisions sometimes create the shattering.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're saying that her own decision sometimes creates shattering. And how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, again, bring awareness to it, but also bring awareness about the decisions that create that karma or that shattering is also useful. But it's often hard to stay present to it, as opposed to getting into being too busy or doing the things I can control.
Well, and isn't there another factor when it's something that when you yourself have created a shattering, there's a need for a self-forgiveness in that case, because if it's something you can't do anything about, it's something that you can't fix, and it's something that you caused, that you were the wild Dharma that caused that, then sometimes it's really hard to forgive ourselves for doing that. So that comes into play as well.
And I often struggle with the fear that comes with that unknown or that shattering, and that the fear itself creates a lot of the suffering.
Yes, the fear itself creates suffering. Yes. And I didn't really speak about the fear and about the uncertainty. Living with uncertainty is not easy. But this is really something that we're called to do in Zen practice, is to live on the edge, on that edge between what is and what will be and what is happening right now, and not knowing what's next, not knowing. And the more you practice dancing on that edge, the more prepared you will be for a shattering, because then you go, oh, look where we are now. Time to pick up the pace, right? Get those dancing shoes on.
I just came from like kind of a different experience of like, I just moved and like one of my bowls broke and my partner told me that I should do the Japanese thing with the gold. But I like left my Sangha that was all self-led. So I was hoping to find an unled Sangha that everyone just self-leads, that doesn't have a leader or like a serious teacher thing.
Okay, so you were, okay, tell me that again.
Just like where I moved from, like the Sangha I was in was it was like different people would volunteer to do the bells and different volunteer to do a reading, but it was all self-led. It wasn't like, there wasn't like a hierarchy system at all.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was really, I genuinely really liked it. It was a very cool setup.
Mhm.
So I was kind of like, oh, well, it's probably not going to find that when I leave.
Well, I think, okay, so could you guys hear that? this person comes from a sangha where there wasn't a leader, there wasn't a teacher in residence. And so everybody just pitched in and did whatever needed to be done. And that was the way the sangha was run. And I think that what we're looking at for Olympia Zen Center is a little more along those lines. In the future, that the lay sangha, because for a long time, there were always monastics living here in the house. And so the monastics did a lot of the day-to-day care of the temple and the different tasks that needed to be done, like leaf raking, which is endless. So in this case, since there are no longer monastics living in the house, then the sangha has really had to step up its investment in the Zen Center, because there's a lot of things to do here. And if you don't maintain a house, it falls apart. And if you don't maintain the things that keep the sangha together, it falls apart too. So I think that in spite of the fact that some of us are monastics, that kind of a perspective is what is needed to carry Olympia Zen Center into the future, to recreate its table. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. All right, then, everybody get your glue and your gold ready. Thank you so much. Buddham Saranam